Hello, everyone, and welcome to the parent night for the Samaritans Suicide Prevention Workshop. My name is Stacy Burns, and I'm the adjustment counselor at Blake Middle School for all three grades. And this is my third year working in Medfield. And once again, I just want to say how amazing it is to be supported by such a great community around our collective work for the mental health needs of all of our students. A little background and information about the Samaritans. We started working and collaborating with them in 2016, and we have found that utilizing their presentation and their staff, it's really been amazing. And we have found that the way they present is just appropriate, informative, and overall a positive experience for our students around such a heavy topic. District wide, we run this presentation in seventh grade, and then we have an extension of it in ninth grade and 12th grade. And we address each topic that is developmentally and emotionally appropriate for the student given their age, from how to help a friend in seventh grade, all the way up through when they graduate high school, how to find resources to help themselves. And we have met this program with much success, and the feedback that we have received has been extremely positive through the years. With that being said, we are here tonight with the Samaritans in order to help you to understand the prevention program that will be presented to your child and the screening tool that your child will take on Thursday. I'm thrilled to be working with and introducing Elise Phillips from the Samaritans. And Elise will be talking a little bit about the Samaritans and the work they do around providing life-saving suicide prevention services throughout Massachusetts, as well as, and most importantly, what information will be presented to your child. Elise, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And hello, I will be your trainer tonight. So tonight we're going to discuss suicide prevention and sort of as parents, giving you some tools and information and how to think about it, how to talk about it, what to do if your child is having thoughts about it. I'm going to give you some data and some resources as well. I just want to sort of put a little bit in here about as parents of middle schoolers, and I have had several middle schoolers of my own. I know that it can be, a really hard time as your children are growing and changing. And I think the most important thing is really to be an active observer, an active listener, and to always have open communication and to be aware of what's going on in their lives, on their social media accounts, everything going on in their lives, who they spend their time with, and what they're spending their time doing. So all of those things become important. In addition, tonight we will talk a little bit about health, wellness, and self-care and well-being, because at Samaritans we really believe in hope, and this workshop is about hope. And it gives us an opportunity to have hope and to be able to support and help somebody in need, and also support our own self-care. So tonight I'll go through a slide deck and I will talk through many of these areas. We'll ask questions at the end. And so feel free to save your questions for that. And then at the end, we're going to also have a very short wellness segment for you to just a few reflective questions to think about. If things that we say are triggering, please reach out to supportive people in your life. And also I will give you some resources right on the screen. So I will do an introduction. I'll sort of do a suicide 101. I'll give you services and resources. We'll talk about active listening skills, assessment for suicide, as I mentioned, well-being and self-care, and moments of compassion, and close. So just some things to remember here, that mental health challenges, grief, and suicide are really heavy topics. So important to take care of yourself as needed during this time. And after our time together, do ask questions, reach out if you need any help. And if you visit our website, which is samaritanshope.org, there is a lot of really helpful information and resources. So let's start off with some facts and figures. So a little over 49,000 people die by suicide annually in the United States. So that's one death about every 11 minutes. It's about 1.7 million attempts among adults that are estimated yearly. The states with the highest rates of suicide include Montana, Alaska, Wyoming, and New Mexico. And states with the lowest are Rhode Island, Massachusetts, which is great, New York, and New Jersey. And about 703,000 people die by suicide annually in the world, which is about one person every 40 seconds. In addition, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death overall for all ages. Interesting fact here, 45 to 64-year-old white males have the highest reported suicide rate, followed by those ages 85 plus, and then ages 25 to 34. And 3.9 times as many men die by suicide compared to women, although women attempt suicide more often. So, youth and suicide. So, the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24 has increased a little over 52% between 2000 and 2021. 22% of students in the United States in grades 9 through 12 reported seriously considering suicide in the past 12 months. And 4 times as many lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual youth report considering suicide compared to heterosexual and or cisgender peers. So communities that we know that are at higher risk are female youth, Black youth, American Indian or Alaska Native youth, LGBTQ plus youth, and youth involved in child welfare and or imprisonment systems. So a little bit about LGBTQ community and suicide. So 4 times as many lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual youth report considering suicide compared to heterosexual and cisgender peers. 40% of transgender adults reported having made a suicide attempt, and 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. Each episode of harassment or abuse increases the likelihood of self-harming behavior by 2.5%, by 2.5 times, and 24% of young teen deaths by suicide occurred in those identifying as LGBTQ plus. So the complexity of suicide. So suicide is often described as a point in which pain exceeds an individual's ability to cope. And I want to sort of take a look at that line. So when we think about suicide, a way that has been described to us is it could be somebody standing on a razor edge of a mountain, and the pain is so bad, the only way someone can see out of it is by dying by suicide. And so it's just a good thing to keep in mind how somebody might feel, because a lot of us really can't put into words what that feels like. We can be empathetic and try to understand it, but this is how it's been told to us. So in order to reduce the stigma and the language, we changed to died by suicide versus commit suicide, because that can really change the narrative. And there are many layers and narratives to every human, and the same is true for suicide. Let's talk a little bit about the risk factors. And before I go into these, these are just risk factors. They're important to know and understand, but it doesn't mean if your child has one of these that they're thinking about suicide, although there are people that do if they have one of these risk factors. So these risk factors include family history of suicide, previous suicide attempts, physical and mental illness or depressive disorders, physical, sexual, domestic, verbal, child abuse and trauma, availability of culturally competent clinicians, substantial loss, whether it's in a relationship, social, work, or financial, facing oppression and injustice such as racism or sexism, substance use or addiction, including behavioral addictions, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to supportive groups and services, and challenges that LGBTQ people face, particularly youth and people that are homeless. So, just some reflections on suicide within communities and identities. In some communities, there may be a lack of access to culturally competent healthcare. There may be cultural differences. There may be stigma. Language might be an issue. There might be socioeconomic conditions, lack of information and understanding, trauma, unique individual and or collective societal history and experiences. So, some warning signs about suicide. So, warning signs can consist of somebody might be talking or writing or joking about death, dying, or suicide. They may have changes in their weight, their appetite, their hygiene, or appearance. They may be declining schoolwork or performance. They may have a loss of pleasure or interest in hobbies and activities. They may have extreme mood swings, including a sudden mood lift, which is really interesting to have sort of that lift where somebody may be, thinking about it or planning it. And direct statements like, I'm tired of being a burden or nobody would miss me if I were gone is considered a warning sign. Sleeping too little or too much, impulsive behavior or seeking lethal means, giving away prized possessions and putting one's affairs in order, and withdrawing from friends, family, or society. There are some sort of resiliency and risk mitigating factors where people see a sense of purpose and hope. Life skills such as good problem solving, coping, and adapting, family and social support and connections, interest, hobbies, and goals, the ability to express emotions, effective behavioral health care, asking for help, and limiting access to means. Faith and values can really help, and a sense of humor. So, how can Samaritan services support others? So, at Samaritans, we really have a lot of information, education, talking and texting somebody, and support. And let me share with you how we do this. So, our programs consist of we have a 24/7 helpline that anyone can call anytime, night or day. And there are trained people that answer the phone lines that can really help. We have community education and outreach is what we're doing now. We do hundreds of these programs every year. And then we have grief support services. Samaritan's 24/7 helpline is the number on the screen. And let me read it if you want to put it in your phones. It's 877-870-4673, which spells hope. And I think it's a good idea to have this in your phone. And if you call or text that, it is free, it's confidential, and it's anonymous. Let's leave that up for another couple seconds. And the good news is in 2020, Congress designated a new 3-digit dialing code, 988. And you've probably seen them like on billboards and all around. And that routes callers to an existing national suicide prevention lifeline. And the 3-digit code took effect about a year ago. And switching to the 3-digit number means that callers who might be experiencing suicidal thoughts or at risk of suicide or struggling with emotional distress will be able to call 988. And it's a really easy number to remember. And the great news about 988 is they try to route it to maybe where it's coming from. So our Boston area may get that 988. It might not, but it might. So 988 is a great number to have in your phone as well. We also have something called Hey Sam, and it's text messaging for people up to age 24. You can reach out for any reason from 9 in the morning till midnight. You're not alone. Are you okay? You can ask for help, 439-726. It's a tech support line for young people, and it's staffed by young people. And you can reach out for any reason from 9 in the morning till midnight, and any age can call this. So it's 439-726. Okay, let's take a second and breathe. Everyone just take a deep breath. We've just gone over a lot of different things, but knowing there are the resources and the help is really important. So, how can you help somebody that needs help? So, the first thing that we say is that being a really good and active listener is helpful. Ask questions and then get the help that's needed. So, the first thing we'll talk about is listening. So, let's reflect for a minute. So, think back on a time in your life when you felt heard. What happened in that conversation that made you feel like that person was really listening? And how did you feel after that conversation? And if we all can think about a conversation like that, it's really helpful to come and sort of present ourselves to be really good listeners. And one thing I like to say is that if somebody comes to any of us and we're like texting on our phone or looking around, we're really not present. And so to sort of put the phone down and really look at somebody in the eyes and have an undisturbed conversation can be really helpful. So let's talk about the do's of active listening. So when we actively listen, we let somebody express their feelings. We listen without judgment, and we listen with our heart, not just our words. We are compassionate. I said we put away distractions and show that we're present through verbal and physical affirmations. Just what I'm doing right now, maybe sort of nodding your head up and down, or just listening and making that eye contact and having sort of open body language. And then paraphrasing what you might hear and validating somebody's feelings. So here's some don'ts about listening. Important to not talk about yourself or your own experiences if somebody comes to you with something that important. Don't tell them that they're feeling unimportant, wrong, or it will pass, because we don't know that. Don't tell them that it's just a phase. Don't interrupt or change the topic, and don't minimize feelings or experiences. So, another reflection, communication that we've heard when someone has said and checks our understanding what someone has told us. And so, if somebody just sat down with you and told you that they were, having thoughts of this, just you can just sit with them, or you can use the words they just used. And we're going to go into a variety of examples coming up. But just being there for them is really important. So here's some types of reflections. There's a simple reflection, which is mirroring, just repeating verbatim what has been said. There's paraphrasing, using our own words to restate what has been said. There's summarizing, which is capturing multiple thoughts that were stated. And then there's complex reflections, which are kind of noticing a theme or relating thoughts stated earlier in the conversation and connecting it to what's been said. So the next area is validation. And validations really convey that we've heard an emotion and that an emotion makes sense. It's normal, or the pain of the emotion is very real. Validations identify an emotion and says why the emotion makes sense. So let's look at these. So normalizing, not personalizing. So we want to avoid I statements when validating, because it may accidentally turn the conversation around to be about us. And there's lots of situations where we might use I statements, but during a conversation around suicidal thoughts, this is why we say we probably want to avoid those. So a good way to begin a validation, and feel free to, and we're going to send you the slide deck of this, but also feel free to take some phone shots if you'd like. But here's a few ways to begin a validation. So if someone does come to you and say they're having thoughts of suicide, it's only natural to, or it's understandable that, It's normal to, it makes sense. You might, anyone would, no one would, that would be dot, dot, dot for anyone. It can be to you or it must be to you. So these are just some ways to get started. If you don't want to go that route, you can just listen and say, I'm just so glad you told me. I'm here for you. Another thing that we talk a lot about are open-ended questions and questions that typically aren't answered with a one-word response. So it would be the difference of how was your day today? Good. Or tell me a couple of things that happened during your day today. Oh, I had a sandwich for lunch. We did this in math and we did this in physical education. So you'll get a little more insight with an open-ended question. You probably do this all the time. But often start with a how or a what. And it's usually pretty important to avoid why questions because those can feel a little defensive. So starting open questions with how or what can be really helpful. This really helps to explore emotions of an experience rather than factual details of a situation. So let's look at some of these. So some how or what questions. So exploring the experience. So what was or what is that like for you? How was that for you? How does it feel when? Or how did you experience this or that? So those are like exploring experience. A clarifying question. I love this one is how so? When you said this, what did you mean? Or what does that mean to you? And narrowing the focus can be questions like what was or has been the hardest part? What do you fear most about? What do you miss most about? And of all the things you're facing, which is causing you the most pain? So all those are really good open-ended questions, and I'm sure that you have a lot that you do as well. And sometimes these open-ended questions can just help you dig deeper and deeper, and then the person or your child just feels really heard. And it's really important. The other thing we talk about is leaning into a conversation. So leaning in by avoiding suggestions. We don't try and silver their line by experiencing, but rather sit with them in whatever they're going through and focus on that. Because whatever they're going through is probably the most important thing for them. And to be able to just take that time and really explore that can be helpful. And so we want to communicate that we're comfortable hearing about their pain and we want to create a safe space for them to share. So asking the hard questions. So these are hard questions. And sometimes they just don't feel so intuitive to a lot of people to ask, but we'll sort of get into ways to do that. So when you think about asking someone if they feel suicidal, what do you feel? Is that hard for you to do? Yeah, I think it can be really hard. So here's how to talk with someone about experiencing suicidal thoughts. And this could also be something that your students are going to hear when they have their program on Thursday, but they may be talking to a friend who's having suicidal thoughts. And so it's important that we give them the tools as well. So if you have cause for concern, don't wait, just ask the question. Be gentle but to the point. Using a reflection can help here. Don't be afraid to ask somebody directly and use the word suicide. Talk to the person in a private setting and allow the person to talk freely and give yourself plenty of time to respond, but don't be quiet for too long. So a direct approach to asking somebody about suicide. So when possible, it's best to ask somebody directly if they're thinking about suicide. It seems like you've had a lot going on recently and you're feeling overwhelmed. I'm wondering if you're feeling suicidal. Or I can hear how hard it's been coping with everything and that you just don't feel like living is worth it. When you say that, it makes me wonder, are you thinking about killing yourself? So that's a direct approach. So, how not to ask about suicide? You're not suicidal, are you? And I know that we want to say that, right? Because we want to get a sort of a confirmation back from them that they're not. Like, that's sort of like me make them kind of stop in their tracks. You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? You wouldn't do anything stupid like that, would you? Suicide's a dumb idea. Surely you're not thinking about that. So, when we do ask, if a person does say yes, that they are thinking about suicide and that they are feeling suicidal, try to stay calm and gain more information by asking these following questions. And these 4 questions sort of give it's sort of a true assessment if somebody is really thinking about it. So number 1, do they have a plan? So have you thought about how you might take your life if you were to? Number 2 would be means. Have you thought about what you may use to take your life if you were to? Number 3, access to means. Where are you in relation to the means right now? So if they've just told you they were going to take a knife and stab themselves, or they had a gun in their hand, their access is right there. If they said, "Oh, it's in a lockbox and I can't even get to it," that's a little bit different. And number 4, the time frame. If you were to take your life, have you thought about when you may do so? So at Samaritans, we actually define risk in the following ways. So no risk is no suicidal ideation. A slight risk is suicidal ideation, but no plan. Moderate risk is suicidal ideation, a plan and possible access to means, but no time frame. An acute risk is suicidal ideation, a plan, possible access to means, and the time frame is more than 24 hours. An imminent risk is suicidal ideation, plan, possible access to means, and time frame is less than 24 hours. So this just really gives us a helpful way to be thinking about it so that we can help our um, help people that come to us. So how do you manage your reaction? So show that you're calm. You don't need to have all the answers or any of the answers. Know that there are other people that can support you. And I mentioned a bunch of different support systems that we have at Samaritans. And be mindful of your limitations and know when to reach out. Okay, so let's talk about getting help. And I'll go through sort of this part, but there's also a protocol at your school. And so, in getting help, if the person has a definite plan and the means are available, the time is set and immediate, the person is considered at imminent risk of suicide, and you should reach out for help right away. If someone's life is at risk, that's too big of a risk to keep to yourself, even if the person that you're engaging with believes what they are sharing is confidential, but never worry alone. So as I mentioned, try to follow the protocol at your school. And maybe at the end, Stacy, you can kind of talk about what that protocol is. Um, Continuing with getting help, convene with others and work together. So again, never worry alone. Ask the person if there's anyone that you can call together. Connect them directly with someone who can get them help, whether it's a counselor, social worker, doctor. Help them make the arrangements to get help and give them resources that they can access immediately, whether it's Samaritan's interface. And if someone's life is in imminent danger, an attempt is in progress, you can call 911. So, important to involve somebody that is thinking about suicide, involve them in finding help. And that works in a couple ways. It works because you're working together with them and you're with them, you're not leaving them. And it also helps for them to sort of dig a little deeper and find people that they really know care about them. And you can say, will you go with me or make a call with me to get help? Will you let me get the help? And can you work with me until we find some help? So the collaboration is really critical in connecting others to the help that they need. Some considerations about getting help. So if someone calls 911, that can be traumatic, especially for those that have police trauma. There's racial considerations for people of color, and some police departments do not have clinicians that ride along with them, nor do they have mental health de escalation training. Emergency services teams, they are dedicated to psychiatric crises organized by catchment area for those in mass health. This number is to call the 877-382-1609 and enter the zip code. And depending on insurance, you may need to present to the closest emergency room. Okay, let's take another deep breath. It's a lot of information to take in and just become centered as we move into our next section. So we also have something called postvention, which is support for those that are grieving after loss. And after a loss, it can be really awkward and uncomfortable to know what to say. And so a few things that can be helpful is just acknowledging the situation. I heard that so and so died by suicide. And always make sure you choose an appropriate time and place to have a conversation like this so your friend can feel safe talking to you about their loss. Express your concern. I'm sorry to hear that this happened. I'm here when you need me. And then you can reflect on their emotions. You're sad and confused about why all this happened, if that's what you see. And then supporting and listening. Be really genuine in your communications and don't hide your feelings. So, I'm not sure what to say, but I want you to know that I care. And that can be one of the best things you say. Offer your support. I want you to know I'm here for you. Tell me what I can do for you. And then ask how they feel. Be really willing to listen without judgment, argument, criticism, or rushing because you have to be somewhere. So, listening when someone is grieving, accept and acknowledge all their feelings. Let the grieving person know that it's okay to cry in front of you and to become angry or to break down. Don't try to reason with someone over how they should or shouldn't feel. Don't try to add a silver lining by saying, oh, everything happens for a reason. Or be willing to sit and make sure that you are willing to sit in silence. That can be very powerful. Let your friend talk about the suicide and offer comfort without minimizing the loss. Sitting in silence can be really helpful. Just sitting and waiting. Okay. So we've talked a lot about warning signs and resilience and risk and what to do and what to say. And I just want to kind of jump in as we're kind of nearing the end of the formal presentation to talk a little bit about well being and self care. And self care really has very little to do with treating yourself and a whole lot to do with parenting yourself and making choices for long term well being, says Brianna West. Um, well being, I do a lot of work in this area, and well being is really, it's a journey for people. We never really arrive, but we're sort of always trying to get there. And there can be sort of multiple balls in the air that you're juggling around well being, whether it's managing stress or time or getting enough activity or eating well or getting enough sleep. And all of those things can really make a difference and have a domino effect. Sometimes we need to choose one. Sometimes we can start with one and let them all sort of cascade and help us. But it can be challenging. So here are the dimensions of well-being that we like to show. So emotional well-being, financial well-being, social well-being, occupational well-being, spiritual, intellectual, environmental, and physical. So these are lots of dimensions. And when we think of a whole person and we think about all the well being that they can sort of always have or not have or be somewhere in the middle, and sort of helping people to find what their definition is of well being. And what I like to say is sometimes well being can be a salad for lunch, sometimes it can be watching Netflix all day Saturday. And whatever it is for, any person, um, is their reality of their well-being. So we can't sort of dictate that. Here's just another chart that kind of goes into um, the specifics of each of these areas. And I just want to point out a couple things that with psychological well-being, and this all has to do with mental health, is taking time for self-reflection, having therapy, coaching, or counseling, meditation, keeping a journal, joining a support group, and being creative. We know that when people are really stressed, to sort of tap into creative outlets can be really helpful. Um, During on this wheel, sort of with mental health and self care, emotionally exploring a hobby, cuddling with a pet, getting engaged with the community, doing things for other people can also be really helpful. Practicing self love, being able to cry and being able to laugh. And then spiritual self care, practicing forgiveness, spending time with nature, connecting with the spiritual community, sing or dance or do yoga. And again, volunteer for a cause. And personally, how can you plan and set goals, or what are priorities that you might have? Is it spending time with family, learning a new skill, reading a new book, making time for friends, reflecting on who you are and what makes you special? And professional, thinking of you all out there, taking your full lunch break, leaving work at work if you can, taking mental health holidays, learning to say no and using your vacation time for vacation, and setting boundaries. And then physical self care, regular medical care, eating healthy and getting enough sleep, exercise or just activity. Some people love getting massages, um, or just hugging and holding somebody can be really helpful. So this is just sort of a chart that can kind of help with mental health self-care, and and also asking yourself and your children sort of what kinds of things do they do to help them feel good. Some students tell me, I take a bath before bed at night and I get really relaxed and I'm just able to go to sleep. Or taking a walk around the block, something like that. So let's reflect for a minute. So, creating the ethos of well being, of self care activities. So, it's multifaceted. It can include elements of wellness that go way beyond mental and physical health. And thinking about how do you take care of yourself personally? Think about that for a minute. And how do you care for yourself as a parent? How do you take care of yourself professionally? If you're out there working. And how do you practice self care throughout the day or work day, on weeknights versus weekends? These are all really interesting things to think about. And hopefully you do have a couple things under each of these. And I'm sure at the middle school there are lots of different ways to get help with this as well. So, just some closing thoughts. Lots of information here. Remember hope and self care, and that we are here for you, and that we all have a role to play in suicide prevention. Being active, non judgmental, listening is really effective and necessary. And for many, thoughts of suicide are temporary, and with time and support, things can get better. And taking care of yourself today by engaging in relaxing or enjoyable activity can be helpful. And moments of compassion, sort of taking care of you can sometimes mean finding joy and belonging, compassion, gratitude. And so consider a compassionate action that you could do in the next 24 hours for yourself. Consider a compassionate action that you may do in the next 24 hours for somebody else. Okay. So, lots of stuff here. I'm going to open up for questions or thoughts or concerns, whatever comes across your mind. There can be questions around the suicide stuff, or if anybody wants to come forward and just maybe share what they do for themselves for self-care, and maybe it's something they do as a parent for self-care for themselves and also for their children. Anyone wants to speak up? Okay. All right. So feel free to have conversations with people that you feel you can have conversations with. This year is an evaluation. If you just scan it, it goes to our evaluation. This helps us to improve our program, so feel free to do that. Stacy, are there any questions in the chat or?
Nope, no, we don't see any. And Elise, thank you so much. That was very informative and just it was really great. And just to wrap things up, on Thursday, your child will participate in a workshop with the Samaritans presenters, excuse me, in their advisory. And at the end of that, they will be asked to fill out a brief screening for adolescent depression. And we realize, as Elise was saying, these topics can be challenging and uncomfortable. And Elise has really thoughtfully been going over all of the things that they can do. But on the day of this for your children, for the students, we will have staff on hand. If any student is having any difficulty with the topic or any emotion comes up at all, myself, Mr. Morangi, Mrs. Gianmarco, Mrs. Worthley, as well as all the other counselors will be available. Just to chat with your child, take them for a walk, whatever they need, they will be supported. And this is so important in so many ways. And together, I really feel like we can reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and empower our students with the knowledge to help one another. So thank you so much, Elise. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
All right. Thanks so much for having me and best of luck. And you'll have some great programs on Thursday.
Thank you.